Thank you for bearing with us as our audio quality is impacted due to recording outside in COVID-safe environments.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Traina here with the fourth episode of my new podcast. Please join me. I'm up here in lovely Pomona, New York, with a wonderful trumpeter that I've had the privilege of working with for decades now. We've grown up together in a way, and he's graced a number of my recordings, possibly all of them, if I hearken back to the beginning. And I'm delighted to have him with me. Scott Wendholt hails from Denver, Colorado, and one of my favorite trumpeters. So one of the reasons I keep calling him back. I really love the way he interprets the music that we present, and I find him to be a great foil for the other musicians and certainly for me and my playing. To give you a little background on Scott, Scott's recorded with and worked with, among others, Vincent Herring, Jimmy Heath. He's worked in the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, formerly Thad Jones and Mel Lewis Orchestra, for many years, and also performed with the John Fedchuk New York Big Band, the Gotham Jazz Orchestra, which is led by Mike Holliber. I've had the privilege of working with both John and Mike in the past, and the Bob Mintzer Big Band. Scott is in demand on the playing scene, as well as he should be, and he's currently on the faculty of the Manhattan School of Music and as a participant and teacher in the Jamie Aebersold Summer Jazz Camps. He also travels around, actually, the country and the world as a player and clinician in many colleges and other learning institutions. So, Scott, thank you for joining us, and I'm really happy that you're able to make some time today to talk with us about your career.
Of course, Joe. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So, tell me, in these challenging times, it's a question that I'm often asking, how are you keeping busy, and how maybe are you trying to plan for the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wrestle with it every day to some extent. Excuse me. At the very beginning of the isolation that we're kind of in, or the quarantining, whatever you want to call it, the pandemic, I kind of took the opportunity to step back, actually, from playing the trumpet a bit. It was having no idea how long it would last. I thought, oh, well, this might be a nice short break, and I've just been playing hard and busy for the last 30 years in New York, so hey, man, my chops could use a break, almost, in a way. And so that was kind of nice to step back from it a little bit. And then I found the next thing being a little bit of anxiety about not getting anything productive done, so I started to do some things that were on the back burner, such as learn a music scoring program so I could finally have some better copies of my small group things that I do.
You do compose a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I do, and my calligraphy's okay, so I think so. The guys have been dealing with it for a long time, but it looks better now having put it down into the computer. So that was a diversion, if you will, and something positive that I got going. Then I'm learning how to set up the computer with my microphone to be able to record remotely, and then learning the video thing, which isn't so hard, but that's the name of the game these days. People are doing a lot of video overdub projects, or live video, or certainly some live, meaning there's a lot of overdubbing going on, but some live stuff, but mostly just kind of approximating what we really do in the real life. So I think those are some things that kind of kept me busy, and now I'm back to kind of not full speed, because that means some days playing 10 hours a day when you're busy, but I'm at least playing my routine every day and getting to some jazz, hopefully, during the day. Listening a lot, listening to some things that I've never, well, not that I've never heard, but that I have not heard in decades.
Tell me, what are you listening to?
Anything. Going back to vinyl.
Yep.
In my large, well, I don't know, it's not huge, but it's a fairly large vinyl collection. Going back to hearing some of those again that I just kind of, lost track of in a way, or CDs even. I had this notion that I would listen to every one of the recordings that I have again. And I'm stalling a little bit now, to be honest, but I'm gonna get back into that.
Your recordings?
No, I'm talking about every recording I own.
Oh, I see.
I mean, you know, there's those ones that I won't go back to, like Soul Station. I've already listened to a million times, so I don't need to even. Maybe I'll go listen to it again anyway. But I'm thinking of the ones that you buy and you listen to once, or maybe thrice, and then you kind of whatever, they didn't grab you, or you had other stuff to do. So I'm just going to make an effort to go back and listen to everything I own, perhaps, before this pandemic's over.
Okay.
Although I'd be happy if the pandemic ends and I don't make that goal, actually.
Oh, I hear you. Sure. You could always get back to it if you ever retire, which I hope you won't, and continue to provide the music that, I mean, I love. I'm a big fan of Scott Wendholt, and I'm gonna say something that he won't remember, but I do. When we were in rehearsal for my last project, which is coming out, I was, of course, a little nervous about the recording ahead and trying to appear that not to be, and very calm and cool and collected until I started to play, and I said, oh boy, I'm not quite where I thought I would be at this stage of the game. And I have said this before, but I followed it up with a remark that I regret a little bit. I said, I always want to follow Scott Wendholt if I solo. And I said, I want your ideas. And what I really meant, and what I should have said, was, I want to build upon your ideas, because in the past, I have listened to your solo. So when I listen to a solo by Scott Wendholt, I'll build upon it, because he's got a wide vocabulary, and I don't have as deep a bag, so to speak. So in a way, I'm complimenting him, but he's giving me a springboard by which to develop what I'm going to do. So I just want to clear the air. I want to try to make my ideas my own, but I tend to need some help.
Hey, that's a huge compliment, and thank you. And I use the example with some of my students about playing with variety. We're talking about, accessing things that we know how to do, but we forget to do them, perhaps. And my example goes like something like this, where I'm on a bandstand, and I remember this happening with Chris Potter, and then he solos after me, and then I think to myself, oh, I want to go again. I forgot to do that and that and that. And not that I can do everything Chris Potter can do. I can't. But he reminds me, his playing is his ideas are so diverse within any given solo that he's someone that kind of hits you that way, that says, let me go again. Mine wasn't good enough. Let me try.
I want to talk a little bit, Scott, about your recordings. I've listened to them many, many times. One especially that I like is called Beyond Thursday, which you made a number of years ago, I think on the Crisscross label, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that one was actually for the Double Time Jazz.
Double Time. Yeah. Okay. And tell me about some of the other recordings. Refresh my memory, because I'm pretty sure I've heard a lot of what you've done.
Well, let's see.
As a leader.
Yeah. Oh. Well, that one was probably my fourth as a leader. That one you referenced, Beyond Thursday, which was a band I was working with at it's now Smoke Jazz Club. It used to be called Augie's,
right?
And it wasn't called Augie's Jazz Club. It was just Augie's Bar, whatever.
Yep.
And so this group, featuring Dave Berkman on Fender Rhodes, Andy Watson on drums, and Tony Shear on bass, and myself, we played there for about 2.5, 3 years on Thursday nights, and never got a chance to record till kind of after the gig had stopped. So it was nice to take advantage of that first recording for Double Time. I think I followed that one up with what was it called? I can't even remember the name of it now. Eric Alexander was on tenor for that one, and then going back, there were 3 on Crisscross, I believe, which would be Through the Shadows was the second one. The first one was Scheme of Things, and then From Now On was the third one.
Right.
And I guess most recently would be my offering, I guess you say, called And Them, one word, with a quartet that I co-lead with tenor saxophonist Adam Kolker.
Sure.
And Victor Lewis plays drums, and
Right.
Ugana Okegwo plays bass. And that's for, that's for the Fresh Sound label.
And you've worked with Adam for a long time. He's an old friend, yes, and colleague?
Yes. We go back the same distance you and I do. Roughly my whole career in New York, which is nearly 30 years.
Now, you were part of a circle of musicians that I met in the early to mid 90s, begun for me with Chuck Bergeron, and I lived in Astoria then, as did many musicians at the time. There was a real enclave, and some of those folks, including yourself, I still work with. Did you live in Astoria at that time?
Yep.
I
was in Long Island City.
Yep.
For the first 4 years, so about 94 or 95, I left to go live in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and then we moved upstate after that, my wife and I.
Yeah, for me it was a real wealth of talent, and I've been very grateful, of course, to work with all these folks in the past and certainly in the present. I was hoping you might tell us a little bit about your career as an educator. I know that you like to teach very much. We've talked about it a bit. I know you travel and teach when you can. Now it's difficult, of course, but tell me about your approach, of course, the students that you have, where you teach, and give us an idea of what draws you to be an educator.
Yeah, it's funny as I think back to when I was in college, and I had a roommate who I had known since I was a kid, and he was going to be a jazz educator. He was going to be a band director, and I could not fathom that idea. He knew so early on, and he is an excellent band director now, and I admire that he was so dedicated, so young. If you would have asked me at the time, I'd have said, no way, no teaching for me ever. You have to have a calling for that. I don't have it. I want to play, And things change over time as you grow up, and you get some offers, and you say, well, okay, I guess I'm unsure of myself, maybe I'm thinking, but I guess it'd probably work out. So I remember, I think one of the first people I taught was a student that the dean at the time of the music school, Fred Griffin at SUNY Purchase, said, hey, I was doing some touring with him in Japan, and I remember him saying, hey, I got a student that I think, would be really good with you. And I think I probably said, I don't know, I don't teach much. He said, it'll be no problem. And I remember, kind of going in a little bit nervous about it. But, over time, you start to develop some chops. You get good at teaching, hopefully. And it grows on you. It did on me. And opportunities keep coming your way, and you just kind of roll with it. So right now, I'm at Manhattan School of Music. I've been there roughly 10 years now. Enjoy my time there. I have anywhere from one student in my private lesson studio to sometimes 6 or 7. And I usually, I think I've always had a combo that I instruct various players. And the other aspect you were asking about, my approach, I kind of don't have I have several approaches, I guess, depending on what I see in my studio. Because I work with beginners sometimes, high school or junior high students that need quite a different thing than the college kids. Some of the college kids, particularly at a place like MSM, Manhattan School of Music, sometimes I'm at my first lesson listening to them saying, oh my gosh, we got to do how many more of these? This is going to be rough because they're playing so advanced already. So it kind of it runs the gamut a bit on my approach. I do like to play a lot with the students. We put on Aebersold play-alongs, or I play a little bit of piano. So that's something I think that's not unique, but it's something I really like to. I'm not ashamed, or not ashamed. That's not a good word, but I unabashedly use the Aebersold play-alongs as a learning tool. They were so important to me as a young trumpet player.
Yep.
So what else? In the larger question you asked, I'm thinking how the the other opportunities like clinics that I do, I guess around the world, but mostly in the United States, go out to colleges mostly. That's an interesting thing too. So you the first couple times you do that, you don't really have a routine, like at least I didn't, things to say. But that quickly as you do it more, it quickly becomes a situation where you kind of know what the average person's going to need in the room. So you get a little bit of shtick together, stuff that you can say that you know is going to land on most of the ears, if not all of them. So, yeah.
Okay. So, Scott, you, as many musicians have had to do, and I'm sure many of them enjoy doing it. It's steady and it's lucrative. You've played Broadway shows over the years, and you've played many of them.
Sure.
What I want to ask is, that's somewhat of a double-edged sword, because the money is very good and it can be very steady, especially if you play a show that takes off and runs for a while. You can make some plans, you can maybe take a little time off, take some vacation. I know that you have, after you play a show for a period of time, you have the permission, it's part of your contract, to take certain nights off. And as you said earlier, sometimes it's not a money-making proposition, but you do it for your art. You do it to basically maybe take the wife out, spend time with the kids. Okay. Now I'm going to mention Ross Konikoff, because for me, he's the one I remember who played Cats from the very beginning. And they still let him run around free. And I wonder, what that really does to a person, in a sense, to have to do that for that long a period of time. I wonder, afterwards, do you retire? I mean, is there a musical life for you after that? But I want you to tell me, what has it been like for you?
Well, you're right. You kind of have to be careful, I think. We do have the luxury of our contract stipulating that we can take off up to 50% of a show, of the shows in a quarter. And if you use your vacation days well, then you also can take off even a little more than 50% if you've got a really busy quarter, and you can't be subject to dismissal. So that being said, if you really are not there ever, it gets frowned upon. I remember the first show I did that I joined in the middle of the run, and I was super, super busy. So when you join in the middle of a run, there is no lock-in. You're just immediately able to take off. So I was taking off because it was the beginning of summer, and I was touring all over with, I don't know, Carnegie Hall jazz band maybe. So all of a sudden there's this young cat who got the gig over other people, and he hadn't been subbing there long. That's me, and he's not there. So I got a call from the contractor saying, "Hey, you don't appreciate the gig?" And I was like, "No, I just," and we kind of hashed it out, and it went okay. And I remember feeling though like, okay, he can't really do anything, but he's not happy. And same with the conductor. He kind of said, just so you know, it'd be a lot nicer if you're here more. And sure. I know we can't do anything now. Kind of I don't remember the exact words. So you kind of have to weigh the two things, that you might do some damage if you're not there for subsequent shows after this one closes, because they all do. And then you mentioned Ross Konikoff. So in his situation, you have to decide if you're going to really make an attempt to get away from the show and keep your career going, keep things that you want to be doing musically going. And I don't know quite how he dealt with that, but the longer a show runs, it's a catch-22 a bit, because you get pulled out of the people assume, oh, Scott's busy, he has a show, I won't call him for that. And you might run into him and say, no, I'll take off.
Sure.
I'll take off to do a $30 gig.
Right.
Oh, really? Yeah. So you have to kind of manage that a little bit with your own career. So. Yeah.
Now tell me, you, like everyone else, have influences. Tell me who your influences are, please. And I know you have something all your own, which we all strive to do. But also, I'd like to hear a little bit about who you like, who's on the scene now, or maybe who's coming up, maybe one of your students.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many, but I like to students who is if they had to mention their favorite player that ever lived. They could still be living, but so I know the list is long for all of us, I tell them, but if you had to give me one, just so I can know where they're coming from a bit. So my person is Miles Davis. That'd be my favorite musician that I've ever heard, even if you weren't a trumpeter. But being a trumpet player, of course, affects me even more. When I was younger, it was probably Clifford Brown.
Oh yeah.
Early on, because someone was wise enough to tell me to transcribe one of his solos, which I didn't even know what that was, or that you could do it. So I was very green, but I was a talented little kid, and can't even remember his name. The person that steered me that direction was very helpful for me. Freddie Hubbard,
Right.
Of course. Woody Shaw,
Mm-hmm.
I say of course, but Kenny Dorham a little later. I mean, there's, the list goes on and on,
Sure,
and
of course.
that we share on our respective instruments, all our heroes. Younger cats, I don't know. Trying to think who I've heard most recently that knocks me out. He's not that young anymore, but I just heard Brandon Lee play recently with Dick Oates, and I play with Brandon in the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. He's a sub quite often there for Terrell Stafford when Terrell's out, so we get to share the bandstand. He's probably 10 or 12 years younger than me, but since I'm 55, he's not a young kid, but he's still he's got something that I really enjoy hearing, and I was reminded of that just last week when I finally heard a live gig for the first time in a while. And then younger cats than that, I don't know. They just seem to keep coming. Ambrose is great. Akinmuser Ambrose is a great player. It's kind of I guess he's still young.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's young compared to us,
us,
right, Joe?
Yeah, well, starting to get a little aches and pains. Now, there's two musicians I want to mention. Whether or not their influences on you or not, jazz tends to be and has been for decades a male-dominated field. And I don't know if you'd strictly say they are jazz trumpeters, but there are two women that I'd like to just mention, and I know you know them. You may have worked with them. One is Ingrid Jensen. You mentioned her before. One is Laurie Frink. They play jazz, don't they?
Yeah, certainly they. Certainly they do. Ingrid still does, and Laurie did when she was alive. Anyway, she's a jazz player, not an improviser so much. Great technician on trumpet, as is Ingrid. But Ingrid's more of an improviser. Laurie would concede, I'm sure. Both of them, though, super talented, and Laurie even more important than Ingrid in terms of how she influenced other trumpet players, jazz and otherwise, mostly jazz trumpet players. Ingrid's a younger woman, so she'll probably achieve a similar status or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
But both of them super great, and Ingrid's now the interim dean right now at MSM, so she's my boss, so I have to say nice things about her.
Very nice. I'm glad I brought her up. Okay, folks, before we wrap it up, I'd like to play one of Scott's recordings. It's from his most recent record, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's a tune I call Ipso. It's because I'm so clever, and you'll see when it's a calypso, I just couldn't call it calypso. So it's called Ipso, and it's on my latest release that I mentioned earlier on the Fresh Sound label. It's called, the name of the record, the recording, is called And Them.
And that's available for sale.
Yes, it is.
Where fine music is sold, folks.
And this, as I mentioned before, but I'll say it again since we're about to hear it, this will feature Victor Lewis, the great Victor Lewis, on drums, Ugana Okegwo on bass, and my co-leader and good friend Adam Kolker on tenor saxophone. Hope you like it.
Okay, folks, that was Scott Wendholt. His latest recording called And Them. The selection was entitled Ipso. And please spend a little dough if you can and buy the CD or stream the music. There's so little that's happening right now by way of live performance. I appreciate you listening in, and I want to thank Scott again for making time for us today.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate you including me in this project.
You've been listening to Please Join Me with Joe Traina. Be sure to listen anywhere you get your podcasts. Keep up with joetrainamusic.com for news and new episodes. Be sure to look out for Joe's newest recording, Tip of the Hat, due out later this month on all streaming services and wherever fine music is sold. This episode was produced by Caroline Voigt.